Hello again, everyone. Welcome back. Salutations to the ladies and gentlemen listening. We are picking up where we left off last time with the development of Himmler's ideology at Wesselsburg. And would you believe I'm at work again? I'm in my car again. We're doing this a second time. Just a quick word of note for all the new viewers coming in. There aren't many of you. This is a very small channel right now. If you haven't listened to the previous parts, I highly recommend you do. You will be very much confused when you pick up this section here. With that little introduction out of the way, here we go. The development of Himmler's ideology at Wesselsburg. Let me turn the fan down so you guys can hear a little better. An entire philosophy was evolved by Himmler during his visits to Wesselsburg. Not only did his racial mythology harden into stone, but his inner convictions about secret energies that lay within the earth, which, if mastered, could lead to the domination of the world, also grew more and more pronounced. He and his inner circle at the castle spent hours pursuing magical methods of controlling people and events. As well as Himmler himself, one of the principal figures in the Nazi era of Wesselsburg was Manfred von Nobelsdorf, captain of the castle. He was a friend of Willigut's, and he not only repeatedly carried out various rituals designed to invoke the spirit of Irminsul, but also more normal ceremonies such as a baptism attended by Heydrich. Just as the SS was seen as an order of chivalry, so Wesselsburg was looked on as the center of rituals, ceremonies, and the theology of the order. The castle was deliberately laid out like a temple, and the crypt became the Holy of Holies, where only the most privileged SS leaders were allowed to visit. In time, it would be also... I can't speak today. In time, it would also be designed to hold their ashes and coat of arms. The center of the crypt was intended to hold an eternal flame in their memory, though the pressure of war meant that this particular part of the project was never completed. Wesselsburg rapidly became nicknamed Black Camelot by other Nazi Party members. It was never entirely completed, largely because of the war, but by 1939, it had become the venue for many of the more secretive rituals and bizarre ceremonies of Himmler and the SS. Public ceremonies in the castle. A number of public ceremonies took place in the castle, including SS weddings, baptisms of children born in the Lebensborn, breeding program, and the Winter Solstice Festival, with which Himmler wanted to replace Christmas, as well as the Midsummer Solstice celebration that he wished to be the main event of the annual calendar. The mystical rites and doctrines that he tried to inculcate into the SS were more than mere empty phrases or gestures. Participating in them made those who took part feel even more privileged and part of a mystical fraternity with special duties and responsibilities. They included a state bordering upon mystical rapture in the devotees who participated, the ceremonies being a kind of act of consecration, which gave a mystical sense of purpose to their community. The midwinter festival of Yuletide was consciously intended to replace Christmas. An SS manual described it as the greatest festival of our forebears. They advanced towards the Yule night with firebrands to liberate the sun from the bondage of wintry death, and thought of it as a young hero come to rouse and free them from their death-like sleep. On Christmas Eve, the main ingredients of festive fare must be carp, roast goose, and wild boar, drawn respectively from the sphere of winter air, water, and earth. In view of the fact that this is the greatest clan festival, it is becoming customary to exchange ideas about the success of steadily deepening research into family genealogy. The elite nature of those who visited the castle. Those who went to Wesselsburg were no longer bound by ordinary human ties, but had their own loyalty to brotherhood, an all-consuming passion to serve it and to cherish and follow its ideals. Wesselsburg was the cathedral where the senior priests of Himmler's dark religion came to engage in their worship and be indoctrinated more deeply into the mythological universe he inhabited. They attempted to achieve a state of rapture in which they could communicate with the secret chiefs, of whose wisdom they believed themselves to be the guardians. This was far more than simply a feeling of privilege. It led to a feeling of exaltation that remained with them even after they had passed out of the immediate ambience of the castle. Even at the lower level of the SS, the preoccupation with doctrine, ritual, and the search for this mystical sense of higher purpose drove them on, and not only enabled them to endure the hardships of the Russian front to a greater extent than those of regular troops, but also to become hardened to the suffering of others. The men who came to Wesselsburg and shared in the rites and ceremonies with Himmler were true believers. Their mission was to establish what they saw as an earthly paradise. There were utopians who truly believed that they were part of bringing about a new world where an aristocracy of racial supermen would rule and bring the perfect society into being. The individual was seen as possessing no intrinsic worth. Only as a part of the whole in an organic society was he capable of achieving value. It was the duty of men who gathered at Wesselsburg, the SS generally, and ultimately every human being, to renounce their individual personalities and subsume them within the task of becoming one of the new men. That it was the final objective of all their training to produce. Rosenberg and lectures at the castle. Rosenberg provided a number of lectures to give talks at Wesselsburg. Some of them were on ordinary subjects such as politics, foreign policy, art and culture, prehistory, racial theory, philosophy, and mysticism, as well as more esoteric subjects. Some of the more exotic topics dealt with were symbolism, runes, mythology, alternative medicine, and the idea of eternal return, which was not simply a belief in individual reincarnation, but also a means in the but also in the notion that the patterns of history itself reoccurred, and that nations repeated an endless cycle of death and rebirth. The particular theory was woven out of the whole cloth by the Freiherr, I'm saying that right? The Freiherr Stromer von Reichenbach, who essentially stole his ideas from the German philosophers Friedrich Nietzsche and Oswald Spengler, as well as borrowing heavily from Hindu religion. Stromer's work was described by one of Himmler's experts as a new expression of the truly Nordic theory of the eternal return. He also cultivated a reputation as a prophet and was one of Himmler's most influential intellectual influences. Although Stromer was an important influence on Himmler, particularly in terms of his growing obsession with Wesselsburg, Willigut was his chief advisor on occult matters. At Willigut's suggestion, Himmler added to the existing design plans the requirement to install a planetarium in the castle, no doubt to enable him to further his astrological studies and draw up predictions about the future of Germany and his own destiny. In addition, he requested that the castle, as the headquarters of an order of chivalry, also needed a strong room to hold the treasure he planned to place within it. Neither project was ever completed, as the necessities of the war prevented the vast expenditure upon Wesselsburg, of which Himmler and Willigut dreamed. Alright, I think this is going to be the final portion I read today. Oh, this is quite a long chunk, we'll see. But I think this is going to be, after this, is going to be the stopping point for this episode. Himmler announces the final solution in Wesselsburg. In 1941, the castle served a more sinister purpose, as Himmler convened a conference in March attended by Heydrich and various senior Nazi ministers and military leaders. At that conference, he announced that Germany would be invading the Soviet Union in the near future, and that not only would the invading forces be required to smash communism, but they would also be ordered to reduce the native population by 30 million. He also declared that Russian food supplies must be diverted to the surface of the Reich, and that Jews were among the highest priority targets to be eliminated in order to make way for the envisaged German targets. Wait, what? In order to make way for the envisaged German targets to be eliminated, in order to... What the heck? I'm stumbling. In order to make way for the envisaged German settlers. My bad, guys. I can't... I'm like losing my brain. I'm having a Joe Biden moment. Although he did not quite spell out the final solution in detail, that came later, there was no mistaking the sinister intention behind his speech. Not a word of protest came from the men seated around the table at Wesselsburg. Himmler preached to his disciples at the castle and engaged in long sessions of silent meditation, during which they all tried to make contact with and strengthen their ties with the race soul. He instilled in them all the sense of greater common purpose than that of the individual, the achievement of the triumph of the Aryan race, and in particular the Germans, over the lesser breeds. Himmler demanded from them a blind obedience to orders, an inner hardness, strength of purpose, and a commitment to bring about the imminent arrival of the new man. He saw Jews, Freemasons, Christians, and Communists as all representing in different ways the opposite approach to his dark vision. Where he placed his faith was in the power of his new religion to transform the world. Communists and many Freemasons were either atheists or at least wedded to a view that happiness on earth was achievable. The Jews and Christians he saw as being governed by their fixation upon the individual. To Himmler, the destination of a single person was unimportant. It was the survival of the values of the group that mattered. As he once remarked in an extraordinary conversation with his masseur, "A man has to sacrifice himself, even though it is often very hard for him. He oughtn't think of himself. Of course, it's pleasanter to concern yourself with flower beds rather than political dust heaps and refuse dumps, but flowers themselves won't thrive unless these things are seen too. I try to help people and do good, relieve the oppressed, and remove injustices wherever I can." Bizarre though this outburst appears, Himmler made an even more extraordinary statement to his SS officers on the 4th of October, 1943. "It is absolutely wrong to project your own harmless soul with its deep feelings, our kind-heartedness, our idealism upon alien peoples. One principle must be absolute for the SS man. We must be honest, decent, loyal, and comradely to members of our own blood, and no one else. What happens to the Russians, what happens to the Czechs, is a matter of utter indifference to me. Whether the other peoples live in comfort or perish of hunger interests me only in so far as we need them as slaves for our culture. Apart from that, it does not interest me. Whether or not 100,000 Russian women collapse from exhaustion while digging a tank ditch interests me only in so far as the tank ditch is completed for Germany. We Germans, who are the only people in the world who have a decent attitude to animals, will also adopt a decent attitude to these human animals. But it is a crime against our own blood to worry about them and to bring them ideals." He goes on speaking of what he frankly describes as the extermination of the Jewish people in a tone of manifest adoration. "Most of you know what it means to see 100 corpses lying together, 500 or 1,000, to have gone through this and yet to have remained decent. This has made us hard." Such were the ideals impressed upon SS leaders who visited Wesselsburg and embodied this distorted vision of decency, kind-heartedness, and chivalry. And we will end there. So it's looking like next section we will start up at the end of Wesselsburg, and then we will start with chapter 6. But that's where I'm calling it today. I have to get back to work, so I will see you all next episode and next time in our reading of The Nazis and the Supernatural by Michael Fitzgerald.